Hey, we're live, everybody. I
Hi. Oh, I'm always behind the eight ball.
just got the notification,
Here we
so
are.
we're not gonna start right away. We're just gonna give people a few moments to join in, and it would be really lovely to know that you're there. So either give us a thumbs up or let us know you're there by adding something into the comments. We're excited to join you today, aren't we, Sarah?
We are. We're going to talk about one of our favourite topics. Lainey and I talk about this all the time.
I have to tell you, I had a meeting. I work with teens, but I worked with a tween last night, and this was the big topic of our conversation. So it's part of everybody's life. And this young man that I was working with last night, 12 years old, really resonated with this as a concept, and it really made him do some inward thought. So this is powerful work that we're about ready to dive into. I'm trying to bring this up on my phone. Can you see
Yeah.
if
I can see Ashley. Hi, Ashley. Ashley's watching. And that's the only person that's commented. I know a couple of people were wanting to. Hattie's there. Hi, Harriet. How you going? And Teresa was about to join, I think, too. As always in my excuse, I am literally like an old person sometimes with this stuff. I'm like,
I got it up. I've got
always. You're in Mexico and I'm in England. This massive delay. Sorry. It's as always with most of the stuff that I talk about and that I'm really passionate about. It's my kids that have taken me here. I'm so grateful to them. That idea that we are, our kids have chosen us, and I feel that so strongly with each of my children. Each of them have taken me to new levels as a human, as a mother and as a human. And this rules one, man, we've had a couple of conversations going on my Facebook page and in the group as well about rules, just putting some feelers out about what people think. And someone commented about this idea of living in values and not rules, and that was really what I was moving to this place for a really long time when the kids were little, but still always butting up against them, basically, because I had ideas about how things should be and they had completely different ideas. And I knew that it wasn't fulfilling anything in me. I knew that these rules that we think we've got to stick to, they just felt really empty. And my kids knew that. They knew it. And that's why they kept on that thing that kids do. They just knew. And I read this blog one day. I can't remember which one. It might have been Pamela Richia's blog or someone. It was an unschooling blog years ago. And this one sentence written by this parent who I think was actually a dad, so it wouldn't have been Pamela Richia, I guess, saying about not living by rules but living in values. And this one sentence, I went, oh my God, that's what we need to do. That's the shift that we need to make. But at that time, I didn't really know how to get there. I'm like, how do I do that? It's the same as when I first read Alfie Cohen. When people tell you or they create this vision for living that resonates, sometimes in our world anyway, in our society, we want this instruction manual. We're like, how do I do that though? How do I do that? But of course, no one can tell you exactly how you can move from rules to values, because that's got to come from your heart. That's the work, isn't it? And that's the work that we've been doing in our family for years. So I do want to tell people that, because I think people get confused when we talk about, oh, let's just have no rules. I think people probably don't understand that there's actually a whole lot underpinning that. It's not just that it's a total free-for-all and everyone just kind of does what the hell they like all the time with no care for anybody else or no thought for anybody else. There's a lot of work that goes into crafting a life beyond rules, isn't there?
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, but before we dive into the topic of rules and how to live a values aligned life within your family, I want to just spend a moment or two to talk about most of us here as adults were not raised in the manner in which we're talking about. We're not raised in partnership. We're raised within the authoritarian paradigm. The majority of the people that are our peers, that are parents, that have chosen a different way of raising their children, were not raised like this. And so we've got to first take a step back and honor and recognize that we ourselves were raised within an authoritarian paradigm, which means that without the conscious thought, we're going to default to that sort of pattern way of thinking. Now, an authoritarian paradigm through school and through, what we know about culture and the world around us, from the perspective of there are laws to follow, there are rules, within your work, there are all of these restrictions and guidelines that you need to abide by. Like, we are raised within a paradigm, and that is the understanding of the world around us. And it does place authority in other people, and that becomes apparent from birth for most of us, right? So we're taking a stand and choosing to raise our children collectively under a different under a totally different paradigm, right? We are choosing to raise our children in partnership, and that takes a lot of conscious thought and inner awareness, which is a lot of that comes from self-inquiry, right? We've got to recognize when those old patterns of thinking come up from within us. And so part of that is our work. And we're going to talk to you today, or share some ideas and thoughts around how to actually reformulate your family structure so you are in alignment, so you are living in that partnership paradigm. But a lot of the work is the not spoken about work, which is the stuff that comes up within inside of us as people that were not raised within that paradigm. So I just wanted to speak to that before we jumped in, because it's not just as simple as, oh, here's how to do it. Here's the manual that Sarah was talking about. Let's do it. There's a lot of that sort of self inquiry and accountability for unpacking our own programming. We call it deschooling in the education world. We can use that term here when we're talking about parenting, but a lot of that is on us. So just be gentle and kind with your. We all sort of fumble through this as we're making those commitments to live in greater partnership within our families. So I'll hand it back over to you.
Well, I'm just going to say hello to a couple of people. Teresa found us. Hi, Teresa. Sasha's here. Catherine, Cher. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. So we're talking about ditching the rules. And as Lainey just said, it sounds simple on the one hand. On the other hand, I think a lot of people that we might post on our personal pages gets people kind of going, no, we need rules. We need rules. We need to maintain order. We need to, but at the heart of it for me, in a parent-child relationship, when you have rules the way we're talking about them, they're most often determined by the parents, and they are very much part of that package of parenting whereby we need to keep control. We need to know how things are going to be. We need to have really clear expectations. Our kids need to know what the expectations are. And in general, it's the parents that are setting the rules. I mean, I've never met a kid. I mean, maybe they're out there. Maybe you guys can comment about whether your kids like rules. Mine certainly never wanted them. And actually don't seem to need them, don't miss them, that's for sure. I can't say we ever had a great deal, but every now and again we kind of jokingly would like, oh, no food in the bedrooms, no jumping on the beds. And the kids each and every time will be like, why? So that when you have rules, you've got to really have a clue about why you're having them for a start. And that's really what had me questioning that stuff several years ago, because I realized that many rules, certainly many of the rules I grew up with, they're just like made up. They're arbitrary. They're made up by parents just because. This was a pretty common response when I was growing up. If I questioned something, because I said so, because I'm the parent. And maybe there is a reason, but yeah, so it's like, as a kid, I was like, man, this stuff's made up. Someone's making this shit up.
I heard my mom say that so much growing up, because I said so.
Because I said so.
Oh my gosh. And I could hear that voice. I'm in my 50s and I could hear that voice in my head still. It's something that continues to play, and I need to remember that that's not reality. That's not how things have to be, just because.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing I think to question as a parent, if you've got rules, so you've decided what they are, then what are you going to do? Rules have to be enforced, right? Because you've got to maintain, law and order, and there's got to be something to back up what you say. You've got to put some weight behind the rules. So there's got to be some kind of behavior management tool, punishment, consequence, whatever, because that's the other thing that never made sense to me, I guess. I don't want to punish my kids, so therefore I don't really need rules, because even if we had a rule, well, what's going to happen if they break them?
Right. And there are people in the world that are raised with the idea that rules are meant to be broken. And, that happens to be my personality. I've always been like that since birth. But there is a comment in the comment thread, and I want to address that before we actually talk about values a little bit. Catherine says, we decided a rule today. You're not allowed to poke anyone unless they want to poke you. And sure, on the surface, that sounds like a beautiful rule. Sure, it's the rule of I hate this word. Never mind. I'm not going to use the word. Reciprocity. Oh, I knew I'd say it. Got it. So yeah, okay. So it's the rule of reciprocity, and that makes sense. But the fact that you're framing it as a rule, as an authority who ordained this rule, even though it's illogical and it seems fair, you're still imposing a rule. So what I would do, and the way that I would like for everybody to think about rules, are rules, we're talking about the opposite of rules is sovereignty, right? So it's consent and sovereignty over self. And there are generally 3 domains where we need to really look at and decide how we're going to apply sovereignty over self. And the first domain is sovereignty over self, and that's the internal self and the thoughts and the triggers and the not being manipulated by your habitual thinking. So that really, you need to think of self as your first domain of sovereignty. The second domain is the realm of sovereignty between relationship, or 2 people or several people or within a family, and how consent plays in that role. And then the third domain is sovereignty or consent in relationship to the outer world. And so what we're really going to talk about are those 2, right? So what us as parents, we're in control of the sovereignty over self, and what I spoke about earlier, which was the triggers and the habitual thinking and my mother's voice in my head saying, because I said so, like, that's part of my domain that I need to claim sovereignty over and really get into check. But if we're talking about now discussing within our family sovereignty or consent within relationship, then it becomes something that everybody is bought into. Well, what does consent look like? Did I give you consent to poke me? Well, then let's talk about what that relationship is to the act of poking. So instead of creating a rule that you poke somebody, they poke you back, let's talk about sovereignty and consent. And we'll talk about the same situation from a different perspective or a different angle. And it shifts living in a rules-based, family culture to a consent-based, or, as we're going to talk about a little bit, values-based. Yeah. So does that resonate with you,
I
Sarah?
think I think that's what Catherine's saying. So what she's saying is the rule was, I mean, and I suspect she's using that word rule kind of tongue in cheek, within the spirit of what we're talking about. You're not allowed to poke anyone unless they want you to. So that is about consent. I think that's what she actually meant. And we had, I've got 4 kids and they're all very close together in age. And so there's always been a lot of very close proximity. Like they were always together, bathing together, running around in the paddling pool naked, so the issues of consent have come up a lot in our family, and these sorts of like funny rules that we always make up, which is I think probably what Catherine was doing with her kids, were always very much around consent. And it's a good example and a good kind of like segue into that idea of moving from rules to consent, because one of the things so just using that example, you're not allowed to poke anyone unless they want you to. I mean, let's just pretend that they actually have made that an actual rule now, right? I hope you don't mind, Catherine, us just like using your example to play around with. But if that was an actual rule, right, that you're allowed to poke someone with a stick if they say you can, the distinction between that being a rule and a broader conversation, which actually can inform a family value, is that you're going to then need a different rule for like every single specific instance, right? So, okay, you're allowed to poke someone with a stick if they say you can. Cool, we all understand that. Oh, well, what about pinching? Are we allowed to pinch someone if they say we can? Or like, what about, and this is actual stuff that used to happen, the kids used to love weeing on each other in the bath, and it's fun until someone doesn't want to be weed on. And so, like when you've got several kids, this stuff just happens, right? They used to like have these funny games where they'd wee in a cup and pretend it was water and try and trick someone into drinking it. So then we had to kind of have these conversations around like, how do you navigate when it's okay to do that? How are you going to get consent from, so if it's a value around bodily autonomy and consent, then everyone can work out how to extrapolate it to any scenario where consent and bodily autonomy comes up. So it no longer becomes just a rule about being poked with a stick. It becomes a much broader but deeper value around everyone gets to choose what happens to their body. And that's not a rule because it's not specific in terms of, a very, very explicit situation. It's a value that's agreed on and discussed and formulated collectively. And it's about sovereignty. I own my body. It's my choice what happens to my body. You own your body. And then how we navigate the relationship between your sovereignty and my sovereignty. And that's a value. And then it's really easy for kids. I think people often don't really understand how amazing kids are at getting this stuff. Like it's actually really easy for kids to understand ownership of their own body. And it starts, when they're little, they live completely in their own kind of ego and their own self, and everything's about them, right? That's where it starts. And that's for a reason. The reason they're so self-obsessed is because they're learning, this is my body and I get to choose what happens to my body. Like a 1-year-old knows that, right? And then, they start poking at other people when they haven't got permission. And I'm sure in Catherine's family, it'd be interesting to know how old your kids are, Catherine. But, a 1-year-old poking someone with a stick, they're sitting right in their own, I'm in charge of my body. And that means to a 1-year-old, I get to do what I want with my body, as distinct from as they get a little bit older and with guidance from us lovingly and using these values. I'm hitting somebody else with a stick and they own their body. So now I'm actually acting outside of that value of consent. And the other person then learns how to sort of set that limit. But yeah, 4 and 7-year-old girls. Yeah. So Catherine, your kids absolutely are learning at those ages. I've got a 6-year-old girl in my mix. And absolutely, they know how to be in charge of their own bodies at that age and far younger. And what they're learning is the impact that they can have on the sovereignty of another. And the beauty of doing that beyond rules is that, first of all, we really get to honour how much kids know and understand about the impact they have on the world and other humans, because they really do, I think, start to understand the weight of that by 4 and 7, absolutely. And like, there's so much space when you remove the rules, you create, when you're not having to enforce all the rules. Stop hitting your sister with a stick. No, I didn't say, no, but you didn't say I couldn't poke her. You said I couldn't, like, all of the time that it takes to navigate these things in the day, you can free up that time and replace it with conversations about, what does it feel like when someone touches your body and you didn't want them to? What is it, and those conversations, and learning how to apply it, like the enormous weight that it is to hold your own sovereignty, and the amount of like respect and love that you then have to hold for the other people in your family who are all individually doing the same thing. And it's so much more exciting than just spending your whole day imposing rules.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well said, Sarah. Yeah.
So yeah, thanks, Catherine, for giving that really good example. That's a great opportunity, I think, that we have when we explore the idea that we don't need rules, and what we can kind of replace them with is so much more exciting and interesting, and allows us to live, our children to live in freedom while respecting the freedom of other people. I think that's probably the fear maybe that parents have, that, if we don't teach our kids the rules, how are they going to learn how to relate to other people? Which sort of assumes that they won't naturally be able to do that, which is not my experience as a parent of 4 kids. That's not my experience at all.
Right, right. And if you have not been living a values-based, within the paradigm and a rules-based life, it takes some work to unpack all of this. And I just want to share with you a little bit about the conversation I had last night with one of my teens or tweens. We were talking about all the things in his life that he had to do. And we made a chart, and we decided to dissect the things that were extrinsically motivated, the things that were intrinsically motivated, and where the two met. And we talked about where the joy in doing each of those things on the diagram was in his life. And the belief that he had before we sort of broke all these things out and did this little brainstorm together was, I have to do things, like, just period. It doesn't matter, my joy is not important at all. My decision, my motivation is not important at all. My word is not important. And that was a huge shift for him, to realize that there was a big majority of things that he was doing because he was motivated by the will of other people or school or homework, and then the things that he did want to do, we looked at, were just as productive, valuable, and worthy, but they were coming from within him. And the relationship to doing those things was really, really different. And so that realization that, number one, he could function in a very, sort of, respectable way and make his own decisions. Like, he has been doing that. Nobody ever told him that he did that. And he never looked to realize that he actually was capable and was doing that in certain parts of his life. That, he's learning that he can advocate for himself, and just to witness that kind of shift in realization was so incredibly powerful. So the work can be done at any age. The work is about us and about having dialogue and conversation, and kids are really, willing to dive into those areas that are about self if they're learning and they're empowered and it feels safe to do so. So if you are not living within this paradigm and wish to partner with your children and go through this journey together and make it extremely, make it, give it dialogue, make it conscious, do it together. And that to me is really hopeful. So yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, actually, that's really, I think that's a great example of where living in our values as a family and having everyone's buy-in, as distinct from having a rule imposed from the top and just having to follow it, really encourages kids, because that's often the lens through which we're talking in our world as well, a world without school, Lainey and I, and our children, of being motivated from within. And that's the hope that we have for our kids. And actually, when they live a journey of self-directed education and learning and learning led by themselves, it's all mostly intrinsic motivation, doing something because it's important to them, diving into some particular kind of learning because it's important to them, as opposed to being imposed externally. And so rules really just continue to feed this idea in kids that everything is driven from without rather than from within. And we all think about the kind of grown-ups that we want our children to be, right? Like probably people think about maybe the kind of life they hope their children will have one day. They want them to be in charge of their future. They want them to own their own power as adults. We want them to challenge things when they're not right, stand up for other people, advocate for themselves. Children who live under imposed rules and don't learn how to be motivated from within are far less likely to be grown-ups who contribute wholly to the world that they live in and advocate for what's right, and are free thinkers and really hold their own power and respect for other human beings, which is all driven from within. And so to be able to give our children this gift of living in family values as a collaborative arrangement, as opposed to these rules that are imposed by grown-ups seemingly at will, it's really aligned with how we would hope our children, turn out when they're grown.
And Sarah, you just flipped on the head the traditional way of thinking. Most parents come to parenting with the best intentions. And because we know authoritarian values, we think I need to teach them responsibility by giving them rules to do this so they won't grow up and not know how to take care of themselves. So the intention, is misguided as it is, according to partnership parenting principles, right? The intention is good. So understanding that allowing their intrinsic motivation, that their own experience in coming to those things themselves, is a much richer and deeper way of experiencing life. If they only lived a rules-based life, then what kind of prison are they in when they're following the rules in their own head when they're by themselves? At least if you're pleasing your parents, there's the reward thing going on, right? If you're a kid and, oh, I did the rule, right? Like now you're imposing them into a prison of living by these rules, and the motivation then, the intrinsic motivation, that voice is quieted because overwhelmingly they've been trained to follow rules or follow a particular set of ideologies that may not be in alignment with what they truly feel. So let's talk a little bit about what a values-based life looks like. You want to start it on that? And of course,
Yeah, well, I mean, for a start, it's messy, because it takes work. Our values evolve as we evolve as a family. The great thing about it, and the most exciting thing about it, is that you don't have to be consistent. You don't have to follow a list. You don't have to be perfect. And there's space for everyone to say what they think about everything. And it presents so much opportunity for connection, which is what we're about, right? Partnering with our children is about connection. It's not about being in charge. It's not about telling them what to do. It's not about making them go to bed. It's about connection. And through that connection, we get to heal from these programs that have perhaps been painful for us growing up. And our children get to just actually be themselves, exactly who they are, exactly who they were born to be, without anybody trying to like mold or shape them. Because in this partnership paradigm that we're talking about, and that we want to inspire people to lean into, what are you doing? You get a spider
water coming up. There's water leaking from my roof. That's not good.
Oops.
Okay, yeah. Sorry about the distraction.
Get a bucket.
It's just dripping on the wall. Yeah, it's not coming down in buckets yet. I'll let you know. Okay.
Well,
from the walls in Mexico. Whatever. Okay. Carrie, I'm sorry to interrupt. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I have lost my train of thought, but I'll just make something else up. Do you know what? It's actually about kids being heard. It's about all of us being heard. It's about kids being heard. It's about kids not learning, because they already know it, actually, that their voice is important and powerful, and that they can choose how they want to live in their family. We all get to choose how we want to live in our family. And that's a power that they will continue to walk through life with, a power, the knowing that their voice is important, their voice deserves to be heard, what they say has meaning and holds meaning, and that they can have a direct impact on the world around them. Because when you craft your values as a family together, that's exactly the message that you're giving them.
And I love that you mentioned that these things are not forever. Like, you can revisit your values as a family that you've co-created in a week, and they may shift. And the fact that you are co-creating this culture, I talk a lot about family culture, and this is one of the tenets of creating a strong family culture in partnership, and that is doing the exercise, even with your 4-year-old and your 6-year-old, to talk about values, to have that conversation and to co-author. It doesn't have to be an actual written, but co-author together, co-create that thing which is uniquely your family in this moment right now, and it serves you. And then the invitation to revisit it, and the invitation to adjust it, and the invitation to keep going back and refining it. That feels like very much an all-in co-creative process. And as challenges come up then, and you've got this core group of people, your family, who have co-created your family culture, which is based on these values, as issues come up, you then can measure them up against and see, is this decision in alignment with our values, or is it not? And you'll know right away. You'll know right away. We're a family who does this or doesn't do this, who values this, who doesn't value this, whatever it is. If the decision that needs to be made is in alignment, that's the definition of living a values-based life versus a rules-based life. Yeah.
Yeah. And because everyone has equal buy-in in deciding how you move forward as a family to address issues or conflict or negotiate things, there's absolutely not only no space for it, but no need for any punitive parenting. I'm talking about, punishment, and the way some people enforce rules. So, you know, things like taking iPads away, or making people go to bed early, or you can't have dessert, or you're not allowed to have that chocolate bar because you hit your brother, or whatever means parents typically use to enforce rules, that those don't exist. It's like totally off the table, because as a family, we've all decided how we want to live. So no one gets punished. You have a conversation about something that's happened or some conflict that is arisen, and there's equal buy-in. It's like, hey, we've designed this stuff together. Is this still how we want to move forward? Is what's going on right now in alignment with what we said that we wanted? Let's talk about it. And there's no punishment, there's no shaming, there's no manipulation, there's just open conversation, and everyone is heard because everyone has buy-in, which is really different to a parent imposing a rule, a child pushing up against or breaking the rule, a parent feeling like they need to set a limit by imposing a punishment to make sure that the rule is taken seriously next time. And then usually the rule being broken again, which kind of often just goes to show that those rules often aren't overly effective anyway, because kids keep on needing to push up against them, right?
Yeah, that's their job. That's their job. And it also leaves space to be human, to be a human family together, to make mistakes, to adjust, to really be present in the flow of whatever's happening. So if we make a mistake and I didn't make a decision that was in alignment with our family values, with the core values that we just decided on, I'm not punished. We need to be in dialogue about that. We need to really, maybe it's time to adjust that value, or maybe it's time to reevaluate, you know, what is important as a family. So yeah, we make mistakes. We're human.
It's okay, and it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, I mean, the great thing too for I mean, it's probably fairly clear why kids would want to live with no rules, right? But one of the reasons why it's so great for grown-ups is because it's really liberating to firstly not have to be constantly imposing rules and punishments and whatever, but we get to make mistakes too without feeling like we have to be shamed, or we, you know, because parents, you know, a lot of parents fall into the trap of punishing ourselves. You know, we do something that we perceive is wrong, and we just want to like flog ourselves and sit in shame about it. And when we have authored our own lives with our kids and we stuff up, we get to treat ourselves with the same grace that we are going to treat our children with, and our children do too. Like, I stuff up all the time. My children are great at holding me accountable, but they're also great at saying, it's okay, Mum. It's okay. It's really okay.
I love that so much. So maybe we should take a pause and see if there are any questions. And if not, we'll wrap this up. I think we pretty much covered, you know, most of what we wanted to share with you guys about living without rules.
Yeah,
So if
there isn't any other questions. Has anyone who's watching now got anything that you guys want to know about how to move forward into a life of values as distinct from rules? If you do, you can pop it up now. But I just want to share one beautiful example that's happening in our family this week, actually, that's related. And it's the sort of thing that there's often no space for when there's a lot of rules. But there is endless space for when you live in values. And that is that my oldest child has been playing around with staying up all night and sleeping all day. And she's kind of been building to it. It started like as a bit of an experiment several months ago, where she really wanted to stay up all night, but she just could never do it. Like, she would just get too tired. And at the time, she shared a room with me and her little sister as well. So it just wasn't really practical for her to be up all night because she's in the same room as us. And she was really motivated to have her own room because she wanted to have her own space and stay up all night. And so she's kind of been incrementally like making it later and later and later, till, you know, just around Christmas time. Actually, she's just literally staying up until like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and sleeping all day. And it's been like so fun to watch her. And she tells me what she's watched, and she's been really proud of herself. Like, oh, I made it till like 4:30 or 5:30 or whatever. And she's been having a lot of fun, but she's just realized that because it gets dark here really early as well, she's actually not getting any daylight. And she wakes up and it's almost dark when she's waking up, and she's decided that she doesn't really, and she's missing out on stuff. Like, she's missing out on time with us too, because by the time she gets up, we're like, she's having breakfast, but we're thinking about dinner, or she wants to do something or hang out, and I don't have time then because I'm now doing stuff with the other kids. So she's realized that she's missing out on some connection. So she's decided that she wants to get up early and she wants to reset her clock. So she's asked us to help her by waking her up in the morning, and she's calculated how much sleep she thinks she needs, and sort of working backwards to work out what time she should go to bed so that she can still get enough sleep and wake up at, I don't know, I think she said 10 or 11. So the last 2 days or 3 days, she's woken up at like 10 or 11. And that's her choice. She's chosen to do that. So this is the stuff about internal motivation and the link between rules and external motivation. So if we were living, you know, with a lot of rules, it's a fairly common rule that kids aren't allowed to stay up all night. And lots of people have rules around technology off. And this is not, I'm not saying this to judge how anybody else wants to live at all, because I really don't care how other people live, but it's just about presenting an opportunity to think about things a little differently, because we don't have those rules and the kids get to choose how they want to be. She has freedom to find out what her body is telling her and to listen to it. And she can approach us with confidence because we don't make her feel ashamed for the choices that she's made. So she's able to, excuse me, she's able to ask us for help in that, and she's got buy-in from us, but she's completely in charge of that experience. And she really enjoys to share her reflections about how that's going. And I didn't realize it, but I think she has kind of treated it as a little bit of an experiment. And she actually said to us the other day in the kitchen, she's like, probably won't be able to do this when I'm a grown up. So I really want to do it now. How fun to be able to do that. She's like living her best life, you know, how fun to be able to do that as a teenager, because she knows that probably one day she'll get a job and she'll have to choose to get up she'll probably set an alarm and, you know, all the things that your life turns into as you get older, if you choose it. And she has this experience of knowing that this is one of the suite of options open to her. Yeah.
So there is a question in the comments from Diana. Yeah. Diana asks, yes, I have. Yes, I have. Where do I start? So yes, I have a question. Where do I start with a high functioning ASD 18-year-old who is opinionated and argumentative? Okay.
Yay for your 18-year-old. They sound amazing.
I love that. I absolutely love that. It's just so funny that is the thing that you ask, because yesterday in my teen class, we were talking about the biology, and I'm going to answer your question in just a second. But let me just share with you this one thing. From an evolutionary perspective, the part of the brain that actually controls impulse control and delayed gratification is not fully developed. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is you want your teens to be more impulsive. You want them to be taking greater risks. You want them to understand the framework, which is safe and not safe. So I'm going to just premise it with that. But from an evolutionary perspective, all great movements in history have been created by adolescents, those between the ages of 13 and 25. Music, history, like political movements, art, theater. Those are the people that are stepping outside of their comfort zone and taking risks and doing those amazing things. So we want to encourage our teens to actually speak up and be able to step into their power. And I know that sounds crazy, but as somebody who works with teen, I celebrate this stage in their lives. We don't want obedient people. We don't want compliant people. We want people that are going to question the status quo. And you know what? We don't have to be part of the status quo as parents. We can partner with them on their journey to finding themselves and encourage more of that kind of exploration. Now, the argumentative part is your perception of them not being compliant to your wish. And so there's probably a little bit of examination that you need to do about what is it that they're arguing with you about. Can I create a scenario where it's win-win instead of I'm imposing my will on this 18-year-old who's stepping into their power? Like it's a different way of framing the whole scenario. And I understand that there are, you know, neurodiversity issues and things that you know, a lot of us as parents are dealing with. And as a parent, we have the privilege of understanding the manner in which to communicate with that, you know, with that child in the best possible way. We also understand what triggers them. So, you know, let's help them step into their power and into their brilliance. I love teens for this reason, right? So did that just flip the whole scenario a little bit for you? Or did that scare you a little bit more?
We'll see if Diana is still watching or whether she's left the room.
I just go like running the other way.
I think it's really challenging, and Lainey and I do want to, and we don't want to be flippant about real challenges that people have. Like, we know this stuff's hard, and it's hard imagining that you could be a different way with your children when perhaps there's been this pattern of it being a certain way for a really long time. So it's not helpful for us to, you know, undermine your experience as parents when things are really hard. But what we really want to do is get you to think about some of these things that are triggers for you, or that you find irritating or grating about your child, you know, arguing with you, constantly questioning everything you suggest. Some of those things which are hard for us as parents are beautiful opportunities to engage with our child exactly where they're at right now, without including the pattern of the behavior that's gone on for the last 10 years that you've got whirring around in your head every single time they speak, but seeing them in the moment right now and thinking about how amazing for a teenager to be alive right now, and all of the stuff that they've actually got to argue about. Like, man, we are on the precipice of like amazing stuff happening in our world, and our teenagers are going to be part of that. And we want them to argue. We want them to buck the system. We want them to, well, I do. That's what I hope my kids, you know, are as confident moving forward, questioning everything out there as they are questioning everything in here, because that's what we need them to do. We want them to stand up for what's right and to push back against things that aren't, and question them. So you know, Diana, the argument is always about going to bed at a decent time and getting up at a decent time, as I need my sleep also. So that feeds into this idea that we were talking about before around sovereignty, and where the autonomy of one person pushes up against the autonomy of another. And that's definitely something that you can address through the framework of values as opposed to rules, because that's a perfect one to look at, actually. And this is one that comes up for us quite a lot too, because my youngest child would stay up much later than she currently does, and sometimes she does, but she needs me to help her get to sleep. And so I have limits around when I want to go to bed. I don't want to stay up till 3 a.m. I want to go to bed at about 10 o'clock. So if she wants my help getting to sleep, lying down next to me, having a cuddle, having a chat, holding my hand or whatever, I'm not going to do that at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so then she has to make a choice. So that's just, you know, one example, Diana, of where you could have a conversation about, okay, what do you need? You're saying that you want to go to bed really late. I'm saying that I need to go to bed at this time because that's how I feel the healthiest. What can we do so that we can both get our needs met? And I mean, your teen is going to be much more self-sufficient at nighttime than my 6-year-old, who couldn't make it down the stairs in the dark to get a drink. I'm assuming your 18-year-old can probably manage getting snacks, getting drinks, turning lights, wiping their own bottom, you know, the sorts of things that my 6-year-old needs help with. So, you know, can you negotiate around, all right, how is it that we can honor your need to be up at night? Because, man, it's beautiful being awake in the middle of the night when everybody else is asleep. And and how are you able to make sure that you get the sleep that you need. And you could do that through the framework of having this collaborative conversation around where those values are. I mean, it's up to you, I guess, to put the words around it, whether you want particular words, you know, truth, honesty, integrity, whatever, it's the sorts of things that people like to name for values, or whether you want it to be a bit more fluid. But instead of having a rule about it, have a conversation about it where everyone's heard, and hold each other accountable, you know, which is what our kids do. Like, oh, Mum, you actually said I could stay up till 2 a.m. and because as long as I don't disturb you, and I haven't been disturbing you, so why, you know, like whatever it is. And it just creates so much space for listening to each other's needs and learning about the impact that you have on other people. Because, you know, that's one of these things that's probably quite missing in the world right now. And you don't learn that when somebody else controls everything you do. You can only learn that, we believe, through owning your own power and owning what you do with your body, and learning what it's like when it butts up against somebody else's.
Yeah, and remember I said in the beginning, the 3 domains of sovereignty: sovereignty of self, sovereignty of self in relationship to others, and then of course sovereignty in relation to the outside world. But the second one, in relationship to others, gets to be more complex. Sovereignty with self, you pretty much have domain there, but sovereignty in relationship with others requires work. You've got to be in dialogue. You've got to be prepared for the mistakes. You've got to be prepared for working together. It's not just your will, which is more important than the will of your child. How do you both come to a place where both needs are met? Again, partnership parenting is all about those strategies and the practice of that value. So hopefully check back in with us, Diana, be in conversation with him and let us know how it goes. You know, maybe sometimes letting go of the thing that you think is best for him because you're the parent and you know how he is. Sometimes we got to pull back and let him discover that and figure that out on his own. But let him know from a very supportive perspective that you're willing to let him go down that path and in this safe space and figure it out. But here's what you need from him about respecting and honoring your sovereignty and your needs, which is the need of you to go to sleep earlier. But do let us know how that goes.
Yeah, we'd love if you put up, you and guys, it's like, please do put up stuff in the group. We don't have to, it doesn't always have to be me or Lainey driving the conversation. If there's stuff going on for you that you want to work through in the group, you want to have some conversation with other parents who are on this journey too, then do put that stuff up in the group. It's exactly what it's there for. So Diana, feel free to do that. And Terry just commented that they've had this same stuff around sleep, but they've actually negotiated a solution. And just reading through your comments, Terry, it's probably the sort of thing that's going to change and evolve, right? And the great thing about doing this through these values and conversations rather than rules is that you've got the space for it to evolve and go wherever it needs to go. And guess what? No one's wrong and no one's right. No one gets to like hold anything over another person. Oh, you broke that rule. You said you were going to do such and such. Because these sorts of conversations remove that from the table. This like need to be right over our children. It's gone. So it's so freeing.
Totally.
Yeah.
So thank you to everybody who participated in the live chat with us. We're really, really grateful you've been a part of it. Yeah, let us know how this was for you, and we'll continue the conversation going in the group. And we look forward to having many, many more of these conversations with you as live broadcasts. Yeah. So thank you.
Thanks, Lainey. Nice chatting with you. I will. We're all going to bed now.
All right,
funnily
guys.
Enough.
I'm not.
No, you got to fix your water leak.
It stopped. Well, that's good. All right, guys. See you later. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Night.
Bye.